This could be devastating for the Chicago Bulls if they do not get a clear direction for their franchise. We're going to be talking about if the Chicago Bulls should be big sellers at this upcoming trade deadline for this next NBA season, or should they keep the roster intact. This is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and this is another episode of Bulls Digest. And before we jump into the content for today, I want to go ahead and share a special message from the sponsor of today's video, NordVPN. Hopefully the Chicago Bulls can get a clearer plan and move the franchise forward. Unlike the Chicago Bulls, you can have a plan when it comes to protecting your devices from online threats. That's right. The best way to do this is with NordVPN, which you can get by clicking the link in the description to this video. With NordVPN Threat Protection Pro, you can block against fake websites, against phishing, and other fraud and other scams online. That's right. You can go ahead and protect your Wi-Fi from being compromised with a single click. You can encrypt and defend your virtual private network. Make sure that you go ahead and you improve your security and block pop-ups. And once again, you can go ahead and get this with nordvpn.com/bulls. This is an exclusive offer where you get 4 months of extra service along with Nord's risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. All right, so I know the NBA season has not started yet, but we seriously need to start asking the question, like, should the Chicago Bulls be sellers at this upcoming trade deadline, which I think absolutely they might want to, especially if they want to get in a clear direction for the future of the franchise. But we're going to dig into a particular article that lists a couple teams that could be big sellers at the trade deadline as far as moving some players to get some draft assets or get younger moving forward for their franchise. And so here is this particular article. You can find it on Bleacher Report, and it's talking about the teams that could be aggressive sellers at the 2025 trade deadline. And look, here's what they had to say about the Chicago Bulls. Now, I don't agree with the fact that they're talking about Zach Lavine and him not actually being an asset. I think that he absolutely will. But they talk about Dosunmu, they talk about Coby White, they talk about Patrick Williams being trade eligible on January the 15th, and they even talk about Josh Giddey. All right, so just starting with the first part of this particular piece, I think first and foremost that Zach Lavine will be a player that is going to be of interest for a team, especially if he comes back healthy and he shows that he can definitely be a great 3 or 4 option on a team. I think that there is absolutely a team that would trade for him and then give the Bulls something back. Now, it may not be a whole bunch, but we'll see how good he is once he returns. Because if you've been looking at the videos, he's been looking absolutely outstanding. I get it. He's not playing against any major NBA players out here, but certainly he's showing that he's healthy and it looks effortless when he's out there. The question is, will he be able to make the game become easier? Because I think at times he just gets into this point as a scorer that he just gets locked in. He takes terrible shots, and at times he gets lost on the defensive end. But I think he's going to be super motivated to really show that he can help out a team. I think that he's ready to move on from the Chicago Bulls. I think the Chicago Bulls are ready to move on from him, but it's just a matter of him going out there and playing like he is capable of playing. And so that's the first thing. Next, they talk about Patrick Williams. They talk about Coby White. They talk about Dosunmu. And I am not interested in moving Coby White or Dosunmu. I think that both of those players are building blocks for the Chicago Bulls. Like, I think that they are on team-friendly contracts, and I think that those are players that, to me, can take another leap or so. Now, Patrick Williams, okay, I know that I just talked about how the Chicago Bulls are investing into his ceiling. Now, I will say this, you're investing into his ceiling, but I think at some point, the patience has got to be running thin for Patrick Williams. I talked about the fact that, look, there is not going to be a whole bunch of stuff in his way as far as players are concerned. And I absolutely think that if he's outplayed by Modest Buzelis and he gets injured, I could not see the Chicago Bulls wanting to continue on with Patrick Williams. So I absolutely think that he could be a trade asset for the Chicago Bulls. And they should probably go ahead and, I think, trade him off, especially if it looks like we are going to see another 3 or 4 seasons of what we've already seen before. With Josh Giddey, the same thing. Look, I like Josh Giddey. I like his potential. He's headed for restricted free agency. If Josh Giddey is not showing you that, he's worthy of a contract, don't go into this next offseason and overbid for his services. You could probably go ahead and package him up and get some more trade assets for your team. All right, we're going to talk about why that is important. So just to break down the first part of the article, those are players that I absolutely think that I'm okay moving. All right, and on top of that, we're not even mentioning Jevon Carter. We're not talking about Torrey Craig. We haven't talked about Lonzo Ball. We haven't talked about Vooch. I think that all those players, they could be moved as well, especially if Lonzo Ball becomes this player that is like Sean Livingston that, again, could come off the bench and can really help a team either compete or win a championship. Then it makes a whole bunch of sense to go ahead and trade him now while he is under the last year of this contract. Because if you know you are not going to extend him to a multi-year contract, it certainly makes sense for the Chicago Bulls to show that he can absolutely play basketball and then go ahead and get him to the next destination where he can continue his career. Vooch, even though there has been a decline in Vooch's game, there is a team out there that would probably like to have him as a backup center. All right, there's somebody out there that could use his minutes. All right, I know he's not the best defensively, but I get it. He can still knock down threes. He still can rebound. I believe he still averaged 18 and 10. Somebody wants a center that can average 18 and 10. Now you just have to wait until it's a little bit closer to the trade deadline, but somebody is going to want that. All right, so I think that those are players that absolutely make sense. With Torrey Craig and Jevon Carter, I know Jevon Carter's going into his second year, and there's a chance he could turn the corner, but I think that in this particular situation where the Chicago Bulls are very guard-oriented, it just doesn't make sense to have him on this team. And you have to ask yourself, with all these players that I'm mentioning, do they fit into the long-term plan for you, right? That's one of the things that we really are scratching our head about with the Chicago Bulls, and that is, what is your long-term plan? If you do not see these players in your long-term plan, go ahead and trade them and get assets back. Torrey Craig, Jevon Carter, these are players that might be able to help a team. I certainly think that, the Clippers or the Sixers or even OKC, those players would be just fine for them. They might need those players in deep playoff runs or the Mavs. So these are things it's like if you can get some assets back, then go ahead and make those deals. All right. And so, moving forward, another thing that they talk about here is they talk about the fact that the Chicago Bulls really will probably stay in the same position that they've already been in, and that is inside the bottom of the middle. All right. And so this is the point that I would definitely like to drive home. If you're not going to be a team that is starting to say, how can we get out of the Eastern Conference, then what are we doing? Okay, I love the Chicago Bulls. I'd love to see them make the playoffs. But really, if we're just aiming to be anywhere from 6 to 9, all right, so that's anywhere from, the playoff spot of 6, and then you're in the play-in situation, and that's all we're maxing out to do, what are we doing here? At some point, I want to see the Chicago Bulls compete for championships. And at some point, what that means is that you're going to have to tear this thing down and seriously get into a different direction and get a franchise player and start to build correctly. All right, because I think we can all agree as Chicago Bulls fans that the Chicago Bulls have not done things logically. They also have not built this team properly. And if you continue to keep doing those habits, they continue to keep stacking on top of each other. And this is part of the frustration that we have as Chicago Bulls fans. So, I'm just going to say the Chicago Bulls need to get a direction, and they're absolutely right. We cannot be just content with being in the middle of the bottom anymore. I think that those days have to be over, and that starts with making some tough decisions, all right, on some players. All right, so another thing that they talk about, too, is with Coby White and Dosunmu, right now they're on team-friendly deals. At this point in time, White has the $36 million, and then you also have Dosunmu, who has a $20 million or $21 million deal, right? And they talk about the fact that the CBA is going to change, all right? And at some point, teams are going to be limited in what they can offer veterans in extension money, all right? They can offer 140% of players' salaries in their final year of their contract, or they can offer 140% of the league's average, whichever is highest. And they're talking about the fact that Coby White has already gone past that, and he's going to be in free agency, and they're hoping that the Chicago Bulls don't go into a situation where we've invested 7 years or so into Coby White and Dosunmu, and we just let them walk for nothing. All right. And so that's why they were, listed as possible players that you might want to trade. Because if you don't see them in your future, which I think that Coby White and Dosunmu can be in the future, I've said it before, I think that Coby White is ready to take on a major leadership role. And I think he can be a franchise player. I mean, I'm sure there's some people out there that say there's no way he could possibly do it, but I think he can. Anyway, and I think Dosunmu can be a really good player as well. And so I'm just saying, if you're not going to keep them in your future, then you're going to have to absolutely go ahead and trade them for assets. And that goes back to what we were talking about some time ago on some videos, that would be a hard rebuild where you go ahead and you sell high right now when you can get a bunch of picks and things for these players now versus later. All right. And so then that leads me to the final rant on this video and why the Chicago Bulls have to make some decisions. Looking at a team like the Boston Celtics, all right, they just won the title, and they were just in the finals not too long ago against Golden State, and they lost. But going back to what they did when they had KG and Paul Pierce, they had to make a pivot, all right? Danny Ainge made a pivot with those players, and yes, they had just come off a very successful window with those players, but they had to make a tough decision on players that they loved. But in doing so, when they traded those players over to the Nets, one of those players eventually became Jaylen Brown. All right, that was a pick that they got in all those picks and all that draft capital that they got back for KG and Paul Pierce. All right, so they got some draft capital and they started to move in a different direction. Another situation where the Boston Celtics won by going out and using their draft capital, they got Jason Tatum. And not only did they get Jason Tatum, they got him because, well, the Sixers were set on getting Fultz at that time, and they traded up for the number one pick, and then the rest is history. They got Jason Tatum, did the Celtics. All right, so that's another reason why you want to have some draft capital if that's what you're wanting to do and get a direction. They built around those players, all right? And then as far as trading players and making tough decisions that have been good for you, all right? So for the people out there that love Zach Lavine, they've loved Vooch, they love Lonzo Ball, the Celtics had to trade off Marcus Smart. They had to trade Robert Williams in order to get a guy like Drew Holiday that helped them win a title. They gave up Malcolm Brogdon. They gave up Robert Williams and an unprotected 2029 first round pick and a 2024 pick that they got in the Porzingis deal in order to get Drew Holiday over. So look, you might have to give up players that they're looking good right now. And that could be a Lavine. It could be a Vooch. It could be Lonzo Ball. You know, we could look at that and go, look, they're playing pretty good this season. But if we know that they're not going to be there for the long term, then we are going to have to trade those players. And so that leads me to asking you now, the viewers, what do you think? Should the Chicago Bulls be big sellers at the next year's trade deadline? Should they just keep the team intact? Just keep Lonzo, keep Lavine, keep Vooch, keep Torrey Craig, keep Javon Carter, and, just play it out and let these young players essentially play when they can. And eventually, they'll hopefully pan out. Or are you in the opinion of this particular video where the Chicago Bulls need to sit down, figure out what they want their long-term plan to be, what they want this team to look like, and start to compete to get out of the Eastern Conference and be in a championship one day? Let me know what you're thinking in the comments. And before we jump out of here, I just want to thank you guys out there, because 72.1% of you that watch the videos are not subscribed to the channel. So please make sure you continue to pass me that assist by mashing on that subscribe button. It would mean the world to us as we try to reach 5,000 subscribers before the NBA season starts. I appreciate you guys out there. And even though we are talking about the Chicago Bulls and wanting them to get a direction, and it's not even the NBA season, we're talking about them making moves at next year's trade deadline, I'm still saying go Bulls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.